My apologies. We have to come out of that and take you to a live briefing on the go by the education spokesperson in Gauteng, Steve Mabona, on COVID-19 in schools.
About overall of 3,000, but now we are standing at a total of 4,700 cases that we have confirmed. And when we look at those numbers, you can see that learners, they are at 2,800. And when you compare that figure that was released yesterday, it was just about 1,900, close to 2,000. So now we are standing at about 2,800 of learners. And the educators, we were at about 1,007. Now we are at 1,500. So you can see an increment there. And we also recorded the general assistant, just about 200, and you have your youth brigades at about 98. So it's an overall increment on all the sectors in our space, which is quite concerning. And when you look at the schools, well, the majority of these cases on learners, they come from secondary schools. Meanwhile, just about 1,000 you will have the primary, but the majority of those cases, they come from high schools. And so we are monitoring the situation very closely. You might recall that we had recorded about 20 schools that we have closed. We are standing at about just over 20, just 22, 23 schools that we have closed. But you'll understand, with the closure of schools, what happens that in the following week, you will find that those that were closed, they will be opening. So the number might then reduce. But during the week, you will then probably have an increment on those schools that will be closing. Because we are monitoring those numbers very closely, working with the Department of Health and taking an advice when they see that numbers are probably higher, and those that need to isolate, they will then indicate that probably you need them to close the school. So that's why we want to call upon parents that we are expect-driven as the department. We don't take a call on closing a school. So we know that there are some political organizations that they will say they want to go to our schools and assist us to close those schools, which you don't see it as being progressive. We need to close schools, but be informed by the facts, be informed by what our researchers are saying, what our professionals are saying, so that then we know that we are informed. Because we know that there's a school yesterday that was closed in Kenilworth by political parties, and it's quite unfortunate that the people were threatened and the school ended up being closed. So we're working very closely. We will be guided, but also we understand that educators are going to be vaccinated. The dose arrival or doses arrival has been confirmed by the acting Minister of Health. So what we are doing, we just have to avail the educators on how many they're going to be going where. We have that data coming from the Department of Health. They've given us that information to say these are the areas that are going to be administering this vaccination process. So because we are talking about a captive audience, we're talking about people that we have in our system, they don't even have to go and register because we have them in our system. We've just been working very closely with the Department of Health to say on this day, this is the number of educators that we're going to bring to you. You might have heard that this process must take 10 days. So we will be working very closely with the Department of Health just to make sure that we avail the targeted educators that must benefit out of this process. But overall, we are concerned and managing and working very closely with the Department of Health.
With maybe Linda Wuche from ENCA, with the continuing rise of cases at schools, does the expert opinion that you keep on referring to, that you are consulting with, not say that you must close schools? What is it exactly that they say would be a point where they would then recommend that you close the schools?
Valentin Tekwa from SABC News. My question is regarding the schools that have already been closed. Do you know how long they'll be closed for, and how long it takes to decontaminate these schools and also to do contact tracing? And which grades, how do you decide, with regards to contact tracing, what you do in terms of grades and so on?
Well, when we say we're expect-driven, we've been expect-driven since the beginning of COVID. We have never closed a school or schools without an advice from professionals. So we will always present our cases. If we have a certain number of cases to present, we present that. Because that's why even the minister, when she's about to present our case, countrywide, she will then collate data from us, as provinces. We will then be in a position to, empower her with information. I know that on Saturday, Minister and all the MECs, they will be sitting on Saturday at the meeting. We will just wait and hear on what comes out of that. But we rely on people that advises on how we're managing and how we must manage. So that's how we are managing the process. And when coming to the closure of schools, indeed, we cannot close a school without being advised as well. And we look at the curriculum time that we have lost. Yes, you might say that from where we are sitting, though we are fact-driven, we are data-driven, but we also need to be mindful of the fact that, yes, we don't want a situation whereby we'll be losing lives. We don't want a situation whereby we must then come back and say this what happened, only to find that we would have averted that. So that's why if professionals advise us on closure, we will then do that. But every time we have been driven by the experts who will then advise to say close or not. And what is the other thing? They look at the numbers. I mean, for instance, in Gauteng, we have over 3 million learners. And you also have about 60,000 educators and over 2,200 schools. So you look at that data and you analyze and you make an informed decision on whether are we not going to hamper the education or the recovery that we are currently trying to have. Because remember, we said it will take time for us to recover in the education sector. I mean, your researchers might have told you that we'll recover probably in 2025. So any curriculum time that is at our disposal, we want to utilize. But we cannot do that at the expense of human life. So that's why any advice that comes, to us, we then take it.
And perhaps just as a last question from me, Lindo Bushe from ENCA, the issue of political parties. We've seen the EFF being at the forefront of actually the closing of schools, as they're saying that they're helping you. But what is it then that you will be doing? Because your desire is not to close the schools, but schools are being forcefully closed. Is there any form of security or plan that you have to actually stop these closure of schools from happening?
Look, we work very closely with our law enforcement agencies. I mean, things that are done unlawful, they need people that manage law to then enforce and make sure that they assist us. All schools are advised. In the event there's disruption or threats, then the police are being called. We know that we saw video footage of some people saying they were going to assault people and all that. I mean, that cannot be allowed in this country. The police will then be called, and the police then must enforce law, because you can't just do as you please in this country. I mean, there's a constitutional democracy. All people have rights, so you can't trample on other people's rights. Meanwhile, you want yours to be respected. So we just want to caution parents, even if they are not political parties, there are parents that will say they want to go to a school and disrupt. You don't need to do that, because we are talking the future of our children here. We are talking about the future of the country. We need to be mindful of the fact that always, whatever we do that is disruptive, it will be a negative result in the near future for these children.
I guess as the last question, you also said that it's not necessary to actually force schools to close because the winter holidays are actually around the corner?
Indeed, I mean, we'll going on recess for winter holidays, but some will say no, a day it's long enough, or some will say a week is too long. You can't wait for that. But we just want to call upon people to say, let's be patient. Once the holidays hit, then we know that there's a recess. People will be at home. And when they come back, probably will be different in the sense that will be probably on a different wave. So we are monitoring and make sure that at least that time will give us space. But we want to call upon members of the community not to disrupt our schools. If experts advise us to close schools, we will do so. There's no need for us to then want to assist the department while we are expert-driven.
Yeah. And just as the last one, Steve, maybe let's conclude this briefing with some of those figures. If you can just repeat the figures of the infections as well as the schools that have been closed.
Look, 2,800 learners that are positive, educators about 1,500, and you have overall 4,700 total. But you also have a general assistant there, just about 200, because 198. And your youth brigade is about 98. And admin staff is about 56. So the overall is just over 4,700. Comparatively speaking, last week we were saying overall it was about 3,000. So you can see a pattern of an increment when you look at the statistics. But we will share the official figures at a later stage today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there was a briefing from the spokesperson for the Department of Education in Gauteng, Steve Mabona. He was updating numbers in as far as COVID-19 infections within the school context are concerned. As you'll know, Gauteng being the epicenter of the spread of the coronavirus in the third wave at the moment. And so Steve Mabona there, speaking on behalf of Panyaza Lesufi, telling us that they have picked up 4,700 cases that have been confirmed of the coronavirus within the school environment, 2,800 of those being school pupils and 1,900 yesterday. Yesterday the number was at 1,900, but today we're talking about 2,800, and saying that with educators, teachers, 1,500 teachers that have been infected as the number increases within the schooling environment.